Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, members, and welcome to the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Advisory Committee on Monday, the 20th of March, 2023. Please note that this afternoon's meeting is being recorded, a copy of which will be available on the Council's committee webpage in the next few days. Hopefully those present will be able to see and hear the meeting. However, in the event of a technical failure, we will adjourn the meeting and set a new time for its reinstatement. All members of the committee should have their camera on, but will remain muted until invited to speak. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. The first item of business on the agenda today is to appoint a chairman for the duration of the meeting. Do I have any nominations, please?
Yeah, I think I would like to propose Brian, seeing as he's the longest serving scrutiny chair of Sedgemoor, I believe. I think it's rather appropriate that he chairs today.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a proposer. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Yeah, okay.
And any other nominations? Members, is there no other nominations?
May I ask, Rose? I'm not on either scrutiny as such. I'm the portfolio holder that comes in.
Yeah.
So was I allowed to second that then? Sorry.
Well,
Rose.
that's fine. Or we I think Councillor Scott was
sorry.
putting a hand up to second as well. So that's fine. We can take it as that. That's okay. So I will take the appointment of Councillor Smedley for the duration of the Joint Overview and Scrutiny Advisory Committee to be carried, and I will hand over to Councillor Smedley to conduct the remainder of the meeting. Thank you.
And had that not happened, I'd have seconded myself anyway. So thank you, everybody, for coming to this. Is what I can only assume to be the last scrutiny meeting of Sedgemoor District Council, unless somebody's audacious enough to have a call in the last week or so of Sedgemoor. I can't imagine that happening, seeing as the scrutiny committees have got on so well these last few years. So could I first check any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you. We have received apologies from Councillors Phil Harvey, Rachel Lilly and Paul Finneran. Okay,
thank you for that. Now, to confirm the minutes of the meetings of the last three meetings that we've had, that's the joint one where we looked at the leader's high-level budget, the community scrutiny of the 23rd of January and the corporate scrutiny of the 30th of January. At the next possible opportunity when we can physically sign them, which I suspect is full council, members okay with us approving those minutes? Everybody seems to be in agreement with that.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Chair, I think Councillor Bruce has got her hand up.
Oh, has she? Is that what that is? Councillor Bruce.
Thank you. It was just because in the chat I saw there was a question about whether we need to have a certain number of members to be quorate, and don't know how many we've got here today. Not many. Can someone clarify?
It is a quarter that we need to have, which would be 6 councillors, which I did count up, and we have.
Councillor Pearce is trying to get into the meeting. She says she can't. Somebody can maybe help her.
Okay. But yes, we have, from my counting, we had 7. So we should be fine.
Great. Thank you.
Could maybe you send her a link or something, Councillor Pearce? She's struggling. Okay, so people are happy with this barely quorate meeting to approve those minutes. Yeah, super. Everybody's happy with that. Urgent business. Well, in fact, I haven't got any urgent business, so I don't think anybody else has got any. So we'll move on to public speaking time. Are there indeed any public speakers, Rose?
Thank you, Chair. There are no public speakers today.
No public speakers. That's fine then. So we won't take any of them. Declarations of interest from anybody surviving in the room. Have got any interest they'd like to declare? Nope. Everybody's declared up. And now we move on to the main item for today. As you know, this is the last. Oh, wait a minute. Councillor Filmer has got his hand up. Councillor Filmer.
Sorry, Chairman. It was just to double check. I mean, I don't think there's any problem with it, but those of us who are double hatters at the moment, and obviously there's a lot about scrutiny coming up in the meeting. Do we need to declare anything on that?
We don't have a legal officer with us today, but we do have a scrutiny officer with us who might know the answer to that one. But we don't want to bring him in too soon. I don't think there's a problem, Rose, is there?
No, I don't think there is. No.
Thanks.
Okay, so bases have all been covered there. the main item of today is to look at what will replace us, because as we all know, Sedgemoor will be history very shortly, and it will be replaced by Somerset, which will have its own scrutiny methods, and we'd like to, of course, scrutinise them, which is why we have with us today Jamie Jackson from Somerset, who is the man in charge of that entire scrutiny project on the new unitary Somerset. So I'm going to hand straight over to Jamie to talk us through it. Jamie, welcome.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Committee, and thank you for inviting me to your last formal meeting. Yeah, so I was invited to sort of just give you a brief summary of sort of how scrutiny has looked up until this point, and then how scrutiny will look beyond vesting day. So if just looking at your agenda pack, pages 16 and 17 summarise quite nicely how scrutiny has been working at Somerset County Council. So we have had 4 main scrutiny committees, which have been scrutiny for policies in place, scrutiny for adults and health, scrutiny for children and families, and then the 2 more recent additions of scrutiny for policies and environment, but also the 5th scrutiny committee, which Councillor Filmer, who's on the call, was the chair of, which was the LGR joint scrutiny. So the scrutiny model at Somerset County Council has sort of evolved over the last probably decade, I suppose, where back in sort of about 2010 it was shrunk back down to a 1 scrutiny committee model, which proved hugely challenging and problematic in order to try and fit all the business on one agenda once a month. But we've sort of gradually expanded through various reasons and pressures and interests out to this sort of the model that we currently have. What I'm now going to, and then what you'll see following on from pages 16, 17, pages 18 and 19, quite logically, are actually what the new arrangements are for scrutiny at Somerset Council, so post vesting day, where you see we've moved to a sort of a 5 formal committee model, and there's been a slight shift in a couple of those areas, understandably, as responsibilities sort of centralise. And what I was going to do is just take you through hopefully a fairly shortish presentation to tell you how we got from one state of affairs to the new proposed and agreed model that will sort of start operating post April. So I'm just going to share my screen. Bear with me. Can you see that on your screen?
Yep.
Thank you. So towards the end of sort of last year, as I was asked to work with the county council's 4 existing scrutiny committees to establish a task and finish group, really, to sort of seek views and thoughts on how scrutiny should function and operate at Somerset Council post vesting day. And as part of the sort of October-November cycle, I sought volunteers for that and was pleasantly surprised by the number of members coming forward. As you'll see in that final bullet point on that slide, I got the sought after 12 elected members, but obviously it should have been politically proportioned to the task and finish group, but the leader of council kindly agreed that we could waive political proportionality and utilise all 12 elected members who had come forward. We ended up with 4 Lib Dems, 4 Conservatives, 2 Labour, 1 Green and 1 Independent. And then we have a few co-opted members on our Children and Family Scrutiny Committee, and two of them came forward as well to join. What was also pleasing is 3 of the existing scrutiny chairs at that point also were part of that volunteer cohort. So the group itself met on 4 occasions during December and 22 and January 23. So it's quite a short time scale in which we had to meet, and the Task and Finish group had to digest a lot of fairly detailed information. And as you'll see, we looked at current structures, what happens elsewhere, possible scrutiny models, and we heard from a director at length as to his experiences of scrutiny, both at other authorities and within the current model at Somerset County Council. Those possible scrutiny models and what happens elsewhere, we considered probably about 8 or 9 different other authorities, some of whom were geographical partners, some of whom are similar size authorities that have recently gone through the unitary process as well, to try and keep it all relevant and to take on board all of those different parts. And I suppose one observation would be that the Task and Finish group got to see there's a fairly wide range of number of scrutiny committees and number of members involved within those, and how those models work. Excuse me. Through those meetings of the Task and Finish group, they then established a series of 7 recommendations, which I'll take you through in a minute. And those recommendations then went through a Somerset County Council sort of internal democratic cycle of the executive and the senior leadership team, and then onto the Constitution and Governance Committee, and finally were agreed by full council on the 22nd of February. And they now form part of the agreed constitution for Somerset Council. So moving on to the sort of a bit more detail about the recommendations themselves. All of the Task and Finish group were very keen that there should be a full review of this revised scrutiny structure within the first 12 months of vesting day to ensure it remains relevant and fit for purpose. I think there was a real acknowledgement from the Task and Finish group that this was probably the best fit as it feels at the moment, but whether that would sort of be the best fit once we're 6 months post vesting, that was uncertain, and hence the review would be very important to ensure that it was as right as it could be, and it was fulfilling its function. One of the first points that the Task and Finish group were very keen on was that they felt that the Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee and the Children and Family Scrutiny Committees were both working well, and actually the move to unitary wouldn't really alter their portfolio or roles and responsibilities, so they are to remain the same. Moving on to point 3, one of the most prominent bits of feedback from members of our Scrutiny for Policies and Place Committee was the fact that they had responsibility for what I would call like the infrastructure type areas, so the asset management, the highways, but also the responsibility for the budget monitoring and financial scrutiny. And as you can probably imagine, over the last year or so, the budget monitoring and financial scrutiny has been quite challenging, as it has for all local authorities. And I think a number of members on the Policies and Place Committee felt that having that budget monitoring responsibility within a quite busy portfolio of other work as well was actually too much. So there was a real press to have a sort of a separate, as you can now see, a corporate and resources scrutiny, which, as well as having that responsibility for strategic asset management, the ICT, strategy and performance, would have that real focus on budget monitoring and financial scrutiny, and which I think will be a real benefit and is very relevant because Councillor Filmer, who I've already referred to, will be the chair of that committee moving forward. So I think that will be really interesting to see, and I think the committee itself will find that budget monitoring not necessarily easy in terms of the figures they're having to consider, but actually that being able to dedicate time to it, I think that will be a real bonus. Just moving on to the next couple of recommendations. So in order to sort of incorporate the additional responsibilities that will take place as part of vesting, there was a slight reshuffle in terms of how the remaining scrutiny committees would operate. So the Environment Scrutiny Committee has shifted slightly, so is now referred to as Climate and Place. So takes on some of those responsibilities that the Scrutiny for Policies and Place Committee used to do, and as a result, actually that now has a really busy agenda, which I know the new executive director for that area, Mickey Green, is, when I say concerned about, he is been very clear so far that we need to utilise the agenda time very well, and that there's likely to be a lot of requirement to have maybe informal briefings for members in between the formal committee meetings. And then the fifth of the 5 scrutiny committees, which is, I suppose, the new one, is the community scrutiny, and that will include areas such as economic development and growth, Hinkley C, transport connectivity, highways, traffic management, cultural services and corporate services. So again, a big brief for that committee moving forward. So moving on to the next recommendation. So those 5 scrutiny committees will be formal meetings. We have now come up with an agreed meeting calendar for 2023 to 24. One of the briefs we were given in establishing a meeting calendar was that we were to avoid, wherever possible, 2 formal committee meetings occurring on the same day. And obviously, with a very large number of committees moving forward, that has actually resulted in that scrutiny committees will meet on a bi-monthly basis formally, whereas historically, in my experience at Somerset County Council, we've generally met probably 10 times a year. We will now be, as it currently stands, we will now be meeting 6. But as I referred to earlier, that sort of assumption that there will be quite a lot of informal meetings and briefings in between those 2. But I think that meeting regularity of the formal committees will undoubtedly form part of that review within that first 12 months. That review within the first 12 months will actually be the responsibility of this, I suppose, the unofficial or informal 6th committee, which will comprise of the 5 scrutiny committee chairs and vice chairs, and their responsibility will be fulfilling an oversight and steering role for those committees to ensure. When I say there's no duplication, I mean that's the important bit, but I think it's also about we will be looking to operate as much joint scrutiny as possible moving forward in a more planned and progressive way. At Somerset County Council, we have often had areas of joint scrutiny, such as, a good one I always use is children's dental health. So obviously that broaches maybe both the children and the adult and the health committee sides, or same with children and young persons' mental health. But another, that there are other areas that cross over potentially now, the climate and communities committees. So there will be a real planned forward work programme of joint scrutiny moving forward, and rather than it being ad hoc and reactive, hopefully it will be a bit more proactive. And actually, I think really beneficial as well that the 5 scrutiny chairs especially form a good working relationship. We have been doing something similar to that over the last sort of 6 months, and that has worked well. And the fact that the scrutiny chairs are getting to know each other well, and there have been a number of the scrutiny chairs were new to the council as well, so it's allowed them to bed in. But doing that on a more formal informal basis, I think, will be really productive as well. So just moving on to the last 2 formal recommendations. I've already touched on number 6, so that specific joint scrutiny committee meeting dates moving forward. And then the 7th and final point, which this had absolute unanimous backing across the Task and Finish group, especially from those members who have been at Somerset County Council for some time. If I just give you a bit of background, so I am the scrutiny manager, for want of a better word, at Somerset County Council, but up until this point, I don't think any more than 50% of my time has ever been dedicated solely to scrutiny. I've always, as with many people in democratic services, you sort of become a jack of all trades and you look after a number of committees and boards and panels. And similarly to the staff and team members who have helped me on scrutiny and helped clerk and prepare, again, none of them have ever been solely dedicated to scrutiny. And with my scrutiny hat on, I think that's been to the detriment of scrutiny. And I think that was generally supported by members. And as you'll see, there was a very clear requirement for a specific and dedicated scrutiny resource to sort of actively and effectively support this new scrutiny model, and that is to consist of one service manager, so that's sort of my level, one governance specialist, which is what we refer to them at Somerset County Council, or team leaders, probably a more understandable role, 2 committee clerks and 2 scrutiny researchers. Scrutiny research posts were something that the county council, for instance, used to have probably 15 years ago, and then they did get culled at some point, and we've never really had that back. And I think, having spoken to several colleagues who are in a similar position to me in other authorities, I think they are a very useful asset and really benefit scrutiny, and also take actually some of the pressure off some of the other people working on scrutiny to do some of that really quality research. So that will be, that's sort of the minimum staffing cohort that will support this scrutiny model moving forward. And yeah, I mean, I think it can only be a good thing. And my hope is that there are a number of, as we move together as one democratic services team from the sort of 5 councils, there are obviously a number of people with good extensive scrutiny experience within that cohort. So I think there will be a lot of people who will be very well suited to some of those roles. And then just moving on to my final slide, which is sort of, I suppose, any other business really in that regard. There were 2 areas that the Task and Finish group really wanted to make clear to the executive and senior leadership team, excuse me, which weren't necessarily formal recommendations, but the top one is about that importance of pre-decision scrutiny and ensuring that the relevant committee is given the opportunity to scrutinise it effectively. I think that the general principle of pre-decision scrutiny and has got better and better in my experience at Somerset County Council. I think a lot of the point regarding that one came from a number of chairs, a number of the scrutiny chairs who were on the Task and Finish group. I think they were all relatively new to the county council at that point, and they felt they were asked to sort of take exceptional decisions outside of committees on probably too frequent a basis, and they felt that there were times where some of those would probably have been a useful sort of scrutiny committee topic, and that it were effectively coming to them a bit blindsided. So I think it was very important for them for that point to be made, and I think there will always need to be that reminder to the executive and to the senior leadership team of that need for pre-decision scrutiny, and at the right time, and asking scrutiny to be a relevant part of that process rather than just a tick box exercise. And then the second bullet point was about including within the new council's constitution that all scrutiny chairs must be a member of an opposition party. And I'm pleased to say that the constitution that was agreed at the full council meeting on the 22nd of Feb. That is very clearly written in there. I think the language in there is will be a member of an opposition party rather than should. So that's even stronger than the point that was made. So that is firmly entrenched within the constitution now. Sorry. So that was the end of my presentation, and then, as I say, those points were formalised in a report that went to full council, and effectively that's what Somerset Council has now ended up with is the proposed scrutiny the scrutiny arrangements that are detailed in Appendix A on pages 18 and 19. That division between the five committees. So I hope that sort of makes sense. That's where we went from. That's how we got to how we got there. And I'm very happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jamie. So you now all heard the future of scrutiny, and it's in clearly safe hands, as Jamie was scrutinising himself as he went through that presentation, asking various questions as he went. Anybody in the room got any questions they'd like to ask? Many people here are already on the Unitary Authority and have been through this before, but I notice Councillor Bruce has a hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just I was part of the working group for this, and I just have to agree that it was a good and constructive process, I think, that we went through. I'd like to ask Jamie, if possible, can you give a bit more detail in terms of when that scrutiny team will be up and running as per the recommendation, please? Thank you.
Absolutely, Councillor Bruce. Yes, so I suppose this is fairly recent news. We've been advised. When I say we, I've been advised by the monitoring officer at Somerset County Council, Scott Waldridge, that myself and other managers of my sort of level, we are currently pulling together a sort of work portfolio for the new, much bigger Democratic Services team, and we're currently working on allocating people to various committees and boards and panels and making sure that the work expectation of them is right for the number of hours they work per week. What the monitoring officer has asked is that we effectively come up with an interim arrangement that will take us from April the 1st through to sort of late August, early September. So it'll sort of be a 5-month interim arrangement. And during that interim arrangement, the scrutiny sort of workforce, or that dedicated scrutiny workforce, won't be in place. That will then be established post September, October time, when the Democratic Services team is likely to go through its whatever new structure it moves into, and if there is any restructure, that will happen around that time. So as it stands, we're probably maintaining a sort of status quo in terms of I will be the committee manager for all 5 committees, and I will probably have a committee clerk and maybe an officer of support alongside me for each of those committees. I'm not going to go into detail or specifics at the moment as to who that will be, because we haven't had those conversations with members of staff yet, so that wouldn't be appropriate. What I am hoping is that support or backup role for the committee, maybe we will start to see some of that initial scrutiny research work start to happen, because I think that would be a really good practice to get into already. And obviously I have at least 2 of my new scrutiny chairs of the 5 are on this call, so I just want to reassure them that we will be doing as much of that research as possible. But as it currently stands, the full formal sort of structure of bullet point 7 that I talked you through is not scheduled to be in place until the autumn.
Okay,
thank you.
Could you tell us who the chairs are of the committees?
I will do my best. I'll just refer to my notes, because it's the Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee will be chaired by Councillor Filmer. The Adults and Health Scrutiny will be chaired by Councillor Slocum. the Children and Families Scrutiny Committee will continue to be chaired by Councillor Lee Redman, who's been chair of that committee for I think about 8 years now. The Climate and Place Committee will be chaired by Councillor Martin Dimmery, who was the Environment Scrutiny Chair, and the Community Scrutiny will be chaired by Councillor Gwyl Wren, who was the Scrutiny for Policies in Place Committee Chair. So I have worked with all of the councillors before, so and Councillor Slocum and I, for example, who haven't worked necessarily at chair and committee manager level before, have already met to have an initial discussion, and Councillor Slocum's already given me some work to get on with, so that's good. So they are the five chairs.
And so the reason I asked you that was just to demonstrate that more than 50% of Sedgemoor are members at the moment. So you've got more than 50%
yes.
Sedgemoor scrutiny of the entire county, which is possibly needed. So any other questions from anybody in the room at the moment? No, in which case, thank you very much for your presentation today, Jamie. And I don't suspect there'll be any motions that will require an extra meeting or further work by officers to deal with this subject. And it'll be back over to you and your new system and team at the new unitary county. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
And
thanks, Jamie. Thank you.
The final item today, as there will be no future scrutiny officers planning report for future events today, will be a history of Sedgemoor scrutiny. Rose has done some research into this. Did you want to present this, Rose?
Thank you, Chair. As you mentioned, there's obviously no work programme for this meeting, so I just wanted to cover a brief history of scrutiny at Sedgemoor to conclude the last scrutiny committee meeting. So the current cabinet executive style system came into place at Sedgemoor District Council's annual council in 2001, which introduced the requirement for an overview and scrutiny committee. Prior to this, a committee system was in place, which made decisions across different committees, which were politically balanced. 3 scrutiny committees came into place in 2001, which were initially numbered 1 to 3. And following a review of the temporary constitution, the 3 scrutiny committees then became named the Scrutiny Committee, Best Value Committee, and Policy Review and Service Improvement Committee. In 2007, following the district elections and the start of Councillor McGinty's leadership, the scrutiny committees became Corporate, Community and Joint Overview and Scrutiny as we know them now. In the agenda, there is an overview of the committee system prior to 2001 and some details of the makeup of the scrutiny committee membership over the years. The membership required of these committees, as we know, has been made up of a chairman from opposition groups and a deputy from the ruling group. The Corporate Scrutiny Committee is focused on strategic business and corporate processes, including financial management, policies and strategies, whereas the Community Scrutiny Committee has focused on service delivery and community requirements, scrutinising and making recommendations to improve services, and also incorporating an external scrutiny role alongside major partners of the council. The Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee has had a focus on the executive budget proposals, but also bringing together the 2 committees to look at other topics from time to time. Just in terms of a little bit of sort of figures and facts, so since 2007, Corporate Scrutiny has had 2 chairmen and 5 deputies. Councillor Smedley has been chair of Corporate Scrutiny since 2010. Community Scrutiny has had 3 chairmen and 3 deputies, with Councillor Julian Taylor initially. Councillor Pearce was then chair of Community Scrutiny from 2015 until the end of 2020, with Councillor Bruce taking over as chair in early 2021. The topics from the most recent quadrennium are listed in the report and have also involved both looking inwards, for example, at the council's COVID-19 response, and also outwards with involvement with partners, including the NHS Fit for My Future consultation on improving mental health services. Scrutiny has always adapted to the changing needs of the council, whether that has been involvement in the Stronger Somerset business case, or then looking at how Sedgemoor conducts business as usual through to vesting day. while Scrutiny may not have been able to make direct changes without decision-making powers, it has been able to hold decision makers to account to promote the best possible outcome for Sedgemoor residents. And then in the report, I've then sort of just done a bit of a summary of a couple of topics that I picked out from corporate scrutiny and community scrutiny that have been covered in the last quadrennium, that I think sort of demonstrate where scrutiny has been able to have an impact and play a role in things that will carry on beyond April. So yeah, that was all. If I can hand back to you, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much for doing. One reason to do that is so that we know where we've come from and the history of place and time and people. It's a surprise to me that I've been chair for so long. I thought it was shorter than that. Just the days just fly by, don't they? All I would say is I'm personally quite happy that Sedgemoor's ending soon, because if it carried on till July, I'd have been down here for half of my life, so it's thankfully can avoid that. And the other thing that I did notice in that list that's been put out is that there's 5 of us out of here today that were on the first scrutiny committees as they were set up. So that's a demonstration of staying power, longevity, glutton for dedication, or whatever. And I think that says something about the nature of scrutiny and the nature of how councils operate, and particularly, as you know, people do have to work together to scrutinise whatever decisions authorities make on behalf of the people. So that's indeed why we're here. The point of it, we've been served by obviously many able officers over the years, and that's a very important part of it. So I think it's just really down to me to thank everybody for their participation in this, and I think I should open up the meeting for anybody else who may want to comment. Of course, there's no business going forward now, is there? I notice Councillor Scott has a hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Councillor Slocum actually put hers up before.
No, it's okay, Liz. It's okay, Liz. He always ignores me, Liz. Don't worry.
I won't say why.
Sorry.
So I'd like to thank, on behalf of the Conservative group members and also Deputy Chair Councillor Lilly, I'd like to thank you, Brian and or Councillor Smedley and Councillor Bruce, for your fair and effective chairmanships of the Sedgemoor scrutiny that I've been party to, and also plus the former chairs that I had pleasure in working with, and Councillor Pearce is here as well, thank you, and Councillor Taylor. So it is the end of an era, but thank you very much for all your input as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott. Councillor Slocum.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, obviously, special thanks to, as a portfolio holder, I've tried to come as many times, but not as many as I'd like. Just like to say thank you to Rose, who's always been, the reports are very detailed and very good and very scrutinising, and yes, kept us on our toes. But I'd also like to remind Brian, Councillor Smedley, Brian, the best time in his life was when I was his vice chairman. He loved every minute of that, I have to tell you, and he enjoyed and looked forward to those meetings. So just to remind him of the better days, I think we worked exceedingly well together. But I think you have really done really well as a group, and both groups of the scrutiny, and that's the job to do. And I hope in the new council we will continue to scrutinise well, to make sure that we establish the right format, the high standards of Sedgemoor. And we have had high standards, and yet to make sure they go forward with everyone else. But obviously, I've come today really to thank you all, because you've done an amazing job. And yeah, and look forward to see you on the dark side.
Yes, of course, there's many happy memories we can all throw into the meeting now. I mean, for instance, being the father of the house, and many people don't realise that, because I was the youngest person on the council when I was first elected, but it's some time in the past, and Councillor Slocum will remember the day when she happened to suffer that terrible defeat at the election box. She probably won't remember. I hardly remember it myself. July the 12th, 1990, Orange Day. I can't quite remember exactly the details behind it, but good to see her still
never give up, Brian, never give up. And I have to say, Brian, 1990 was a relief day to some extent, because I was very young as well and I needed more experience, but you know, hey ho, still here.
And I just noticed that I think it's Councillor Pearce. She's down as Catherine Guest, but I assume it's Catherine. Councillor Guest.
Yeah. Thank you. Just thank you, Rose, for all the support that you gave when I was chair. And I was just looking back at the work programme, and a lot of it features the ecological emergency. So I'd like to think we push that agenda along a bit, which will stand us in good stead for the new authority. And thank you to Liz, who was vice chair with me for a while, for all the support, and just to wish everyone well for the future. Thank you.
I noticed Councillor Bruce's hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say this chairing the community scrutiny was my first time ever as chairing a committee, and I found it a really enjoyable experience. So thank you to all the committee members, to Liz, to Rose. You know, I think we did a good job for a few years and I really enjoyed it. But I'd also like to say all the scrutiny committee members over the years, how wonderful that you've kept going in scrutiny, because we need that. We need more of that. So thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, so I see no more old gold hands up in desperation in the corner. Reminds me of the Wolves game at the weekend. But that's thank you very much, everybody. We keep going around saying thank you to each other for as long as the meeting lasts. But everybody knows the work that's been put in, the work required and dedication to do this job. And all the best to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.